Emotions Matter. Brought to you by Emaww.com. That's EMAWW.com. Your solution for emotional intelligence. Welcome to the Emotions Matter podcast. I'm fortunate to have the pleasure of interviewing our special guest, Laura Bond. Laura received her BFA in Related Arts and her MFA in Acting Directing from Syracuse University. Laura is a Level 5 certified master instructor in Alba emoting and is internationally recognized for her universal teaching approach of Alba emoting, as she helps match the needs of individuals from varying backgrounds and professional fields. She also has published a book called Team for Actors, which is a highly successful acting training book that uses Alba emoting to help actors connect emotionally and sincerely with their characters. She has been involved with this method since the early 2000s and is currently a full professor at the University of North Carolina, Asheville, where she teaches Alba, acting, directing, storytelling, public speaking, and voice production. And now I'd like to welcome my guest, Laura Bond. Welcome, Laura.
Hi, Monique.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the Emotions Matter podcast.
Oh, I'm very excited to be talking with you on this podcast, and I'm really excited about the development of this podcast.
So you visited our website.
I did. I signed up. I'll be a follower. Absolutely.
Great. We're glad you're part of the family.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Consider me that, please. And okay. I'm excited about its development.
Great. Now, tell us a little bit about what Alba emoting is.
Alba emoting is a physical approach to emotion regulation. And it came out of research done by a neuroscientist and research psychologist, Dr. Susanna Block. She headed up a team of scientists in the 1970s who set out with the intention of trying to measure emotion in the human body. And as they were doing their research, they made some exciting discoveries. And one of the most important discoveries that they made was that they found a common breath pattern that was associated with the basic emotions and a distinctly different breath pattern for each of the basic emotions. And along with each of those distinctly different breath patterns for each of the basic emotions, they also found some specific muscle triggers or muscle movements that were specific to each of the basic emotions. And so with that discovery, they asked another research question and they said, well, what happens if we actually teach people how to do these breath patterns and these muscle movements? Will it help somebody manage their own emotions? Will they be able to organically evoke emotions in themselves and then give them the power to manage and regulate the emotions in themselves? And so they set back into their research and found that, yes, indeed, that is what is possible. And so out of all that research and development from the 1970s through the 80s, they developed the Alba emoting method. And now a lot of the American teachers call it the Alba method. Sometimes you'll just hear it called Alba. But it is basically an emotion regulation method that came out of scientific research that helps people manage their emotions physically. There's nothing done with your thoughts or your imagination. It is all through breath and muscle movement.
Wow, that is really fascinating, especially the fact that we don't necessarily have to always connect our emotions with a thought per se. So tell me, what got you involved with this method?
I was actually at a conference, and I was constantly in search of methods that I could rely on and feel were reliable to pass on to my students. And at that time, I was a young professor teaching acting, and I really wasn't satisfied with a lot of the emotion methods that I had been taught as I was training as an actor. And a lot of the techniques were oftentimes emotion recall or emotion memory or using your imagination. And those are methods where oftentimes people are being asked to use their own life experiences to substitute for the experience of the actor. And so they're reliving moments in their past over and over and over again. And it's not a healthy approach for an actor to use. And thankfully, a lot of research these days, too, they're starting to look into that, and they're agreeing that that's not very healthy for an actor to do time and time again in their performance. And then imagination methods, too, are not necessarily very reliable. They're not very consistent. And for young people to use their imagination, they can't always imagine the life of somebody who's much older than themselves if they're playing a character that's older than themselves. So I was in search of something that was consistent, reliable, and, dare I say, scientific.
Yes.
And I found it. I found it at this conference. I remember looking into the program and seeing the description of Alba moding, and I thought, wow, it's almost as if my prayers had been answered. And I went into the workshop and saw it demonstrated, and then later had a chance to try it in a workshop, and I was sold. And that's when I started my study of Alba moding.
Were you able to immediately respond to the techniques that you were shown in that workshop? Relatively easy to get connected with these emotions?
Yes, the workshop demonstration was a nice short demonstration where you were just getting a taste of some of the patterns. So it was just a small demonstration, but enough where you could feel it, where you could, because it's one thing to describe, to tell somebody what Alba moding is, but until somebody actually has the opportunity to try the breath pattern and try those little facial muscle triggers and the postural attitudes and really feel how it truly does make them feel differently, you don't really fully understand what the method is and how effective it is. And in that workshop, they did let us try some of them, and I could feel it right away. And that was enough for me and enough for the people around me. A lot of us, I remember, went on, and I saw a number of the faces on and on again in workshops to come over the years.
You said earlier about being a teacher and finding a method that you could share with your students. Outside of teaching acting, for example, do you think someone else would find value in this method, and how so?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of actors know this technique and are drawn to it because of some of the ways that it was originally used within the profession or within the research, because when they were first looking for subjects to test the teaching developments, they used actors, because if you're looking for somebody who's willing to be emotional and take on emotional embodiment, they look for actors and use them a lot. But I truly believe that this method is the kind of method that everybody could use and everybody should have available to them. And it is my mission in my professional career to make it available to all people. And when I went to Chile on my sabbatical to work with Dr. Block, I was determined to learn as many different universal methods of teaching Alba emoting so that I could make it more approachable to the general public, and to find more methods that could help people become much more sensitive in their somatic sensing, their ability to sense emotion in their body, to feel it, and then to give them very gradual, gentle, step-by-step technique to take on Alba emoting in their lives and to apply it in their lives in a way that made sense for day-to-day living practices. And so that's what I have done for more than a decade now with my practice of teaching Alba, and in the workshops that I do and in the writing that I do. And so I truly do believe that it is the kind of method that anybody can use in their lives.
Now, usually when we think of a method, we think of something that has steps in it. So how many steps or how many sections, for example, would a person have to master in order to generate that emotion in them? You mentioned something about muscle tension one time. So what are the things that you're going to be looking at as you help someone discover how to connect with these emotions?
Well, that's a good question, Monique, because it varies so much from person to person because we have a lifetime of our own personal patterns that we have developed. And so everybody learns the Alba method at their own pace. Some people, I've been amazed at how quickly they learn it because they have had a lifetime of different somatic practices where they can take it on very, very quickly and master it quite quickly. And then there are other people who haven't been as in tune with their own bodies. And it takes them longer just because they're just learning how to be in tune, to somatically sense, to be aware of what's happening in their bodies. So sometimes they take longer. So that's one thing. Another thing is, yes, there are steps. Generally, we help somebody learn just the basics of these patterns. They first learn the breathing patterns to learn how to control their breathing and learn what those breathing patterns are of each of the basic emotions. And then gradually we teach them what those different muscle triggers are in the face and in the body, which we call postural attitudes. So you might call them even your posture. But it's basically your larger muscle groups reorganized in different ways that affect your posture. They're sending very strong signals to the brain about emotion. And those are pathways going directly to the brain about, oh, this is what I'm feeling. And they're reciprocal. It's whether, the brain is saying, I feel this, and then your body changes, or your body changes posture and then sends a signal to the brain. And the brain says, oh, that's what I'm feeling. It's a two-way street there of communication. So a lot of what we teach when we're teaching the Alba method is to help people understand that theory, as well as those steps of these three parts of breath and facial muscle movement and postural attitude and how they all fit together.
I guess it would be difficult then, like if I woke up and I have a lot of tension, let's say in my shoulders, and I'm working on an emotion, let's say like laughter or joy, it might be more difficult for me then to totally get engrossed in that if I'm carrying physical tension already. Would you say so?
Oh, yeah. Yes. If you've got pain, tension in a certain area that does not allow you to loosen up, to access that looseness in that area, it is much harder to fully access happiness, joy, certainly. And until that muscle tension, that pain is addressed, you're not going to fully feel it, and you'll have mixed emotions. You might be wanting to feel some happiness and joy, but there's a part of you that isn't going to feel it because of that pain, because of that tension.
Tell me, Alba has how many emotions?
6. And believe it or not, there are 3 positive emotions and 3 negative emotions, even though we try not to refer to them as positive and negative. But it's interesting how there are 3 of each. And there are patterns, there are pairs. We've got anger, and we have happiness or joy, and we have sadness, and we have fear, and we have sensual or sexual love, and we have tender love in there as well.
Now, when you think of these 6, and you said that sometimes people think them as positives and negatives, do you find that any particular ones tend to be easier or more difficult for people to respond to?
Interestingly enough, the positive emotions, the loose emotions are harder. They tend to be harder for a lot of people to access for a number of different reasons. One is because the positive emotions are the emotions that we are generally biologically meant to feel when we are content, when we feel safe. And they're not as obvious to us, and they intermingle with each other. And so they're hard to distinguish one from the other. They happen oftentimes all at the same time, and we move very easily from one to the other. But also they happen when we're really relaxed muscularly, where our muscle tone is relaxed. And so sometimes people have a hard time accessing that because we oftentimes are running through our lives with so much tension, and we might not know full relaxation unless we're asleep. And some of us don't even sleep with full relaxation. And the negative emotions, they're biologically wired as our alert systems. They're meant for short-term use, and they're meant to send very strong signals to our bodies that something is wrong. So they're obvious, they're strong, they get our attention. And so we notice them. We notice them in our bodies much more, we're much more aware of them than we are of the positive emotions. But also they have that tension in them, or at least 2 out of the 3 do have a lot of tension in them. And so because of that, oftentimes they're easier for us to access because of all the tension that we hold in our bodies.
Of the 3 that you say would be the negative emotions, which of the 2 carries the most tension then?
Anger and fear. They're high tension, high anxiety patterns, and they have the most tension in them out of all 6 of the basic emotional patterns.
And where would you say that tension is focused? Is it face? Is it the shoulders, the chest, the abdomen, the legs, the hands? I mean, when you say tension, where is it concentrated?
Well, it's going to be in the entire body, but interestingly enough, with anger, the muscular tension is focused in trying to advance the body forward. So all the muscles are tied up and trying to push the body forward. So people might feel it more obviously in, say, the chest pushing forward, or the jaw pushing forward, or the hands fisting and moving forward. And fear is the muscles are tensing and pushing the body backward. And so people might feel the tension building up in the upper back, clenching the muscles in the upper back and in the neck muscles, pulling the back of the neck back and pulling the shoulders back. And in the high chest area, it's the only breathing pattern in all 6 of the patterns where people are using high chest breathing too. So the chest is constricted and tight in that emotion as well.
That is really fascinating. So I would imagine then in everyday life, we might be able to pick up, not only in ourselves, but maybe in others, if their underlying emotion, even if they might not be revealing it in words, could be seen by whether or not they are leaning towards us or away from us, maybe. What do you think?
Oh, yes. Yes. The more that we learn about emotions and learn how they are projected in our muscles, in our posture, then we become so much more aware of it, not only in ourselves and what we're doing in the muscles inside of ourselves, but we can see it so much more clearly in other people, in the way that they sit, in the way that they walk, and the way that they move through the world. Absolutely.
Wow, this is really fascinating. Oh, hold on. I have a question here from one of our listeners, so let me pull that up. Looks like a Patsy from North Carolina. She wants to know if any of the emotions that we have any similarities to them, or are they really all distinctly different?
That's a good question. Our emotions, we start off as babies with basic emotions. It's very similar to color theory in that the colors in the world start with primary colors, and then all the colors that we see in the world are mixes of those primaries that create this incredible array of colors that we see around us. Well, emotion theory is very similar. So we start off as babies with these basic emotions that are distinctly different. They're very, very different. And in Alba emoting, we identify 6. There are different theories that identify more or less than those 6, but in Alba emoting, we identify 6 basic emotions. And then as we mature in life, we start to take those basic emotions and mix them. And depending on our life experience, those mixes can be very hard to discern from each other, very hard to differentiate from each other. And so I could give the same word of a mixed emotion, say like envy or sympathy, to a group of 20 or 30 people. And I've actually done this in workshops. And I can ask all 20 or 30 people to show me, what does sympathy or envy look like? And they'll demonstrate it, and every single one of them will have something slightly different in their face, in their body, in how they're conveying it, because mixes are subjective because they're based in our life experience.
That
So
is
those are
really
the
fascinating.
similarities. Yeah. They're very difficult to discern one from the other when they are mixes. Well, and then we have what are called entanglements too, on top of mixes. And those are when we have an emotion that we want to express, like say, I want to express my seriousness, my anger, but I can't because life experience, my personal life experience may have entangled it with sadness, and that I cry when I'm angry. So somebody who has an entanglement can never purely express anger without tears. And so that is not a mix necessarily. That's an entanglement because they actually want to express their anger in a pure way, but they can't.
Tell me, Laura, if you don't mind sharing, are there any of the emotions, because you yourself have gone through the method, where you made some discoveries about yourself on a particular emotion and how you might have worked through that?
Oh, yeah. It was very liberating for me to study Alba moding. And everybody I know who has studied Alba moding, they first learn so much about themselves. And so whether they're coming to study it, to teach it to others, or to use it in their therapy practice, they're always learning about themselves first. And for me, I learned how to unentangle. I had a serious entanglement in my anger. I couldn't access anger. It wasn't available to me. I was raised to be a sweet little girl who smiled through everything and, don't rock the boat and be pleasant. And so being raised to do that and not show my anger, I didn't know how to show my anger. I didn't know how to express it. And I was afraid to express my anger. And so whenever I did express anger, I had tears entangled in it. I had fear entangled in it. And so I could not access it at all in a pure state. And it took me 2 years and 2 full intensive Alba workshops before I could truly access pure anger without fear or sadness entangled in it. And it was very liberating to be able to stand in my power and to just simply express seriousness. It doesn't mean that I had to rage around the world and, tell everybody off that was in front of me. That's not what it is. It means that I was able to make sure that people would take me seriously and I could stand up for myself in the times when I needed to stand up for myself without having tears or without having fear. And then because I had studied enough of the method, I knew how to express my anger in a level that was appropriate for the occasion and to make sure it was short-lived enough that I didn't do any kind of damage within the situation either. It was amazingly liberating to learn.
Wow, I love that expression, stand in my power, and to have anger be thought of as taking my seriousness, expressing my seriousness, and the fact that anger, while it seems to be a, quote, negative emotion, that it actually can be positive in that it can make change and not necessarily be destructive.
Yes, and that's why Alba practitioners, we don't like to refer to the emotions as negative and positive. I mean, we use it as a way of explaining sometimes in this instance because that's the general usage, but we don't see anger as something negative because once you understand it and you know how to use it in a way that benefits you, that is appropriate for the situation and in the level for the situation, low-level anger, basic emotion, low-level anger, very, very low, is concentration. It is take me seriously. It is pay attention to me. I'm saying something that is important. Boy, is that important for us to know how to do.
Oh, yes, most definitely. So tell me, Laura, if someone would like to know more about Alba emoting, where should they go find it?
Well, right now, one of the best places to go is actually my website, because other websites are, we've had them, many of them have gone down. And so my website is consistently staying up. So they can go to breathexpress.com, which is my website. And that's breath, and then it's just an X, and then PRESS. So breathexpress.com. And I've
Okay.
had it up for years, and they can learn all about Alba emoting. And then from there, I provide links to any other sources that are currently active.
Okay, so it's Breath Express. It's www.breathxpress.com. And
Yeah.
Laura, what kind of information can they gather from your website? Do you have some workshops or any other reading material that could be available to them?
Yes, absolutely. When you first get to my website, you'll see I try to provide some fairly regular blog posts of information and articles. There's a page all about what is Alba emoting. There's a resource page with all kinds of reading resources and articles. Anytime I learn about any new resources, whether it's books or articles, that I provide those links to those sources. And then I have a workshop page that any of my workshops that are upcoming, people can learn about how to take a workshop. And if I'm recommending another workshop too, I provide links to that. And then I have a book that's going to be released very soon. That
Oh, tell us, please.
It's called The Emotional Body, and I am just about ready to have it finished and published. And this is the book that I have been waiting to publish for a number of years now. It's a book just specifically for the general public. It's not for actors. It is designed for all people of all professions and backgrounds. It is physical emotion regulation for all people. It should be available within the year, I hope.
Wow, that is so exciting. But just a quick question on that. Do you recommend, before someone ventures out doing some of the exercises, are there recommendations on how to approach that? Because you sort of mentioned earlier about kind of the liability of touching in with our emotions. Do you have any kind of suggestions or tips if someone were to purchase the book and wanted to try some of the exercises, or are they set up in a way that helps avoid any kind of what we were talking about, entanglements?
Oh, yes. Well, I truly believe that one of the best ways to learn Alba emoting is through a workshop, is to work with a certified practitioner, because you'll have somebody in front of you who has been trained to work directly with people, to help them see what's happening within them and to guide them. The book is a great resource for people to do as a self-help, and they can follow those exercises. But if somebody has a background in if they're seeing a therapist, or if they have a trauma background, even in the book I say follow this with consultation with your therapist and practice the exercises. Be gentle, especially with some of the stronger negative emotions like fear that can cause a lot of anxiety. It's important for people always with any kind of emotion study to proceed with some caution in those areas, especially with fear that can bring up anxiety in them.
Wow, that's wonderful advice. Something that we don't always consider when we're dealing with emotions is that ability to also learn how to step out of that. That's kind of crucial. We all want to get into it, but how do we get out of it?
Right, and one of the very first things that we always teach in the Alba method is a neutralizing pattern and a step out. Glad you said step out, because we don't teach any emotion patterns until somebody knows how to clear out of the emotion. And so that's taught in the book, as well as taught in every single workshop that you encounter in Alba emoting as well. And that's a very, very important part of our practice, that we don't tell people in the book or in workshops to continue with any practice in the Alba patterns, the emotion patterns, until they feel like they have perfected, or at least have a good solid basis in the neutralizing pattern and the step out.
That's very responsible and extremely ethical way to approach that. That's great. Well, Laura, I just want to thank you so much for all the information that you shared with us. I think our audience has a lot of information to delve into and to investigate. And I know personally that you are always available and willing to talk about the Alba emoting method. And so I do encourage our listeners to reach out to you if they want to learn a little bit more in depth, separate from articles and such, because I know you're always willing to discuss this because that's a passion of yours, is to share this information with everyone. And I just can't express enough how I appreciate you spending today with me.
Thank you so much, Monique. I enjoyed it very much, and I just love talking about Alba emoting. So I'm happy to talk about it anytime.
Okay, great. And we look forward to looking out for that book. I will be sure to purchase a copy for myself.
Great, thanks so much. And if people are interested in getting a copy once it's published, all they have to do is go to my website and sign up for our mailing list. And we'll make sure that once it's out and available, that everybody who signed up for our list or follows us on Facebook will know. They'll know.
Thank you again. So everyone, this was Laura Bond and our guest on Emotions Matter podcast.